Your Excellency, Mrs. Velma McNeish, the Ambassador of Jamaica, my good friend Patrick Gomes, the Secretary General of the ACP, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying that it gives me great pleasure to address you this morning as our representatives of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states this morning. And let me once again thank your chairperson, Madam Velma McNeish, for inviting me to have this opportunity to address you this morning. I personally feel greatly honored by this invitation, and I also want to personally thank each and every one of you for finding time to come and meet with me this morning. Kenya has had a long history of cooperation with the ACP, and my government and I attach immense importance to the work carried out by the ACP, and Kenya has always participated actively in the activities of the group. In fact, it is only recently in 2014 when I welcomed the ACP family to Nairobi for the 99th Council of Ministers meeting and the 39th Joint ACP-EU Council. And late last year, I was gratified to note, and I want to register my own personal thanks and the thanks of the people of Kenya for the tremendous role you all played in the preparations for the WTO MC10 and the energy each and every one of you put into the negotiation process that shaped the outcome document. As Patrick here has said, and in Swahili we say, asanteni sana. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Indeed, I encourage all of you to carry on this critical role and to ensure that our voice is indeed heard in all global fora. Our shared history, cultural and economic similarities led to the establishment of the ACP group in Georgetown in 1975. And through a process of bonding among delegations from Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific regions, that began in 1973 when the negotiations for the Lome Convention commenced, and recognizing the commonality of our circumstances and the inextricable link in our destinies, those delegations coordinated, harmonized their positions in negotiations with the European Economic Community at the time. Since then, the ACP partnership has continuously grown through successive Lome conventions and currently the Cotonou Partnership Agreement. The ACP was conceptualized to enhance economic, political, and cultural dialogue, not only between ourselves as ACP members, but also with the European Union. But also, we have actively, through this process of dialogue, also had the opportunity to engage each other at a bilateral level as well. In this day of increased globalization, the importance of this partnership cannot be underrated given our shared principles, traditions, and the common aspirations of our people. Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the impact of the development cooperation efforts with the European Union has been limited despite elaborate mechanisms in place. For instance, less than half of the allocated European Development Fund resources end up being dispersed. And this we can only attribute to the conditionalities and other bureaucratic requirements. The Prime Minister of Samoa, for those of you who were in attendance the day before yesterday, made specific reference to this particular point in his statement at the opening ceremony. On the trade front, it is apparent that the current regime has not fully met the expectations of ACP countries. The share of ACP exports to the EU has gradually declined over the years, and in addition, ACP countries' exports are limited to a few primary products. Our respective countries have long been a source of unprocessed raw materials produced for the global market. We can only blame the ever-daunting supply-side constraints existing in our countries and the increasingly stringent conformity requirements that they keep on piling. Preference erosion is also a major factor in the dismal performance of our products in the EU market. Capacity building assistance is therefore necessary for us to all increase our productivity. And for trade, AFT will go a long way to address supply-side and trade-related infrastructure obstacles, which constrains our ability to engage in international trade. Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, 40 years since Georgetown, the ACP partnership is at a critical yet momentous stage as we approach the sunset of the Cotonou Partnership Agreements in 2020. As we deliberate on the future of our partnership with the EU and indeed the global community of nations, we must take stock of the geopolitical environment in which we find ourselves today. Developments such as the end of the Cold War and the establishment of the WTO resulted in a major policy shift away from the ACP, lessening the appetite for the ACP within the EU. And after the end of the Cold War, the geopolitical significance of the ACP as a group diminished as eastward expansion gained momentum. In view of these developments, we together have a responsibility to find a new meaning for our solidarity and strength. I believe this gives us an opportunity to reflect on our history and appreciate our potential, while at the same time underlining the reasons that we can learn from the past for greater prosperity for the future. The ACP post-2020 debate requires strategic thinking on the way forward. I welcome and commend the various reports and dialogue tools that are currently guiding this debate and highly endorse deeper engagement with the European Union and other interlocutors to ensure that the ACP-EU cooperation initiated by our forefathers continues after 2020, but with a new beginning. These new set of circumstances notwithstanding, we should continue to ensure that development issues, particularly poverty eradication, remains the focus of our agenda. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is critical to us. Linked to this, we should ensure that all partners honor their commitments arising from the major United Nations conferences and summits. In short, it's time to stop talking and to put up. They need to do this. We just don't attend we don't have the money to attend conferences anymore. If we just attend conferences with no product, we might as well not attend them. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have undertaken new aspirations to create better livelihoods for our people. And while we undertake steps at the national level to improve lives and build capacities, we have to be alive to the fact that this global agenda calls for concerted efforts so as to realize a better world for everyone. I call upon our partners in the international community to scale up their development support and financing agenda, and specifically for the implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of the Third International Conference on Financing for Development, which I believe is a major step forward in building a world of prosperity and dignity for all. Going forward, we firmly believe that the new ACP-EU partnership should be markedly different from the existing framework. It should be based on partnership rather than patronage, and interdependence rather than dependence. It should lead to the rapid transition of ACP countries from mere suppliers of raw materials and commodities to producers of value-added goods. In this regard, the existing pattern of supply and production should be broken, and we should carve for ourselves a place in the global value chains. As a starting point towards this new beginning, the economic partnership agreements should be implemented and continually reviewed with development in focus in a manner that reinforces our efforts to develop our productive capacity and at the same time complement regional economic integration. In East Africa, these negotiations with the EU were concluded, and indeed we have set a date for signing. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, millions of people around the world, and more so in our countries, continue to live below the poverty line without access to basic necessities. I am here primarily to attend and have participated in the European Development Days under the theme 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Sustainable development remains the bedrock of our diplomatic engagements, whether in the political, social, or economic fields. I believe 2015 marked an essential turning point in our international responsibilities and obligations as global citizens with the adaptation of the Sustainable Development Goals in September of 2015, and thereafter the first ever legally binding climate change deal and agreement adopted in Paris in December of last year. We can now look to the future with hope, but more importantly with determination. Through these actions, our generation should go down in history as the age when we took responsibility for our actions in the interests of future generations. However, the battle has not yet been won, as implementation, as we all know, remains an uphill task. We in the ACP fraternity, and given our level of development and being the most vulnerable to the vagrancies of climate change and climate shocks, have a duty to remain focused and to demand from the rest of the world that they play their part as well. We should keep the multilateral system engaged on the implementation of the Paris Climate Pact. Excellencies, indeed again, as we enter a new phase of our engagement with the European Union, I speak on the need for values and value addition to our raw material before export to international markets. This will ensure that we develop our infant industries, flourish our national economies, but most importantly, provide jobs for our young people. I place specific emphasis on fostering partnerships between the public and private sector in our respective countries. The private sector can play a vital role as an important partner in attracting investments and expanding economic activities. Innovative mechanisms such as public-private partnerships have proved to work well for us in the implementation of public projects when well managed. I believe you have taken these and other innovative ideas into account in the future implementation of the ACP Private Sector Development Strategy, and I urge for increased dialogue on how to strengthen private sector as well as to build its capacity where it is not fully established. Information and communication technology remains important in and adapting to the ever-changing world. Traditionally, ICT from our more developed partners has been viewed as more advanced, while our own indigenous technology has been relegated to an inferior position. Each of our countries is endowed with indigenous technology that has stood the test of time, and with increased research and investment will earn its place in the world. M-Pesa, a product of Kenya, is a clear example that this is possible. As we buy into modern methods of ICT, I urge that we imbue indigenous technology into our education system so as to give our nations, and especially our youth, hope and aspiration for the future. Excellencies, as we celebrate our milestone, set foundations for the future, we must take cognizance of the global threats that continue to undermine our successes. Transboundary crimes have continued to be perpetuated across our borders and even between continents. Money laundering, terrorism, trafficking in persons and goods, among other social ills, occur on a daily basis. The ongoing migration crisis, the attendant loss of lives and suffering calls for urgent action from all sides. The threat of global terrorism and violent extremism has also assumed monstrous proportions. We must collectively address the radicalization of our youth as the pipeline for global terror and its financing channels. Indeed, as ACP ambassadors, you must come up with ambitious recommendations on how to mitigate these scourges and encourage further with our development partners in establishing concrete solutions that work for all of us. Madam Chairperson, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I want to once again applaud the long-standing friendship that we have nurtured over the years. We stand together as a community with a common history and vision for the future. And I personally look forward to welcoming each and every one of you to the UNCTAD Summit to be held in July this year. And once again, on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya, thank you all for your continued support and solidarity in our march towards providing and giving greater prosperity, equity to the peoples of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific regions. I thank you for your attention, and I appreciate you all coming to give me these few minutes to listen to me. Thank you very much.